If you provoke me like that again, Mia, if you look at me with those innocent eyes while defying my direct orders, I will forget how to be kind." Those were the words he growled against the shell of my ear before my world fractured. I shouldn't be in his private study, not during a blackout. Not while the house is screaming with silence and the scent of iron. Blood lingers in the air. I only wanted a flashlight. Just a simple tool to guide me through the dark corridors of the Rossi estate, where the shadows seem to have teeth. But now I'm frozen, my hand trembling over the edge of his mahogany desk. Under the weak flicker of my dying phone screen, I've seen things I wasn't meant to see, a discarded handgun and a bandage soaked in fresh crimson. The heavy oak door clicks shut behind me. I don't hear him move, I only feel the air change. Alec emerges from the darkness like a ghost born of silk and violence. He's discarded his jacket, his white dress shirt unbuttoned to the mid-chest, sleeves rolled up to reveal knuckles that are bruised and split. He doesn't smell like the kind employer who bought me vintage poetry books yesterday. He smells of rain, expensive scotch, and cold, hard adrenaline. He moves closer, his presence a physical weight that pins me in place. He doesn't stop until the heat radiating from his body reaches me. He looks down at my face, then at the evidence on the desk, then back to my eyes. The gentle mask he wears for his nephew has vanished, replaced by the predatory gaze of a man who owns everything he touches. He leans in, trapping me between the desk and his towering frame, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register that makes my heart beat against my ribs like a trapped bird. As his hand reaches out to tilt my chin upward, I find myself wishing I had never walked into that recruitment agency 3 weeks ago. I find myself wishing I had been smart enough to recognize that his kindness was nothing more than a silver-plated trap. But 3 weeks ago, I was desperate. I was just Mia Donati, a girl with a mountain of debt and a heart full of hope, walking into an interview that would seal my fate. Thank you for sticking around with me, and welcome back, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now back to the story. The law offices of Bernardi and Associates occupied the top floor of a building that had no business existing in Mia's world. She'd taken 3 buses and walked 6 blocks to reach it, her second-hand blazer collecting sweat at the collar, her mother's voice echoing in her ears. "Where the pearl earrings, tesoro. They make you look respectable." The pearls were fake, costume jewelry from a decade ago, but Mia touched them like talismans as she stepped into the marble lobby. Everything gleamed. The floors, the chandeliers, the receptionist's perfect smile as she directed Mia toward an elevator that moved so silently it felt like ascending into a dream. The attorney waiting in the conference room looked like money incarnate. Silver hair swept back from a patrician face. A suit that costs more than Mia's annual stipend. Hands folded on a mahogany table that stretched between them like a battlefield. Miss Donati. He didn't rise. Didn't offer his hand. "Please. Sit." Mia sat on the edge of a velvet chair, acutely aware of every loose thread on her blazer and every scuff on her shoes. She was a graduate student drowning in debt, and this room knew it. This room was designed to remind people like her exactly where they stood. "The Rossi family has reviewed your credentials," the attorney continued, sliding a manila folder across the table with surgical precision. "Your thesis on childhood trauma and selective mutism was compelling. Your references were exemplary. Your background check was illuminating." Mia's stomach dropped. Background check. Standard procedure. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "The family values discretion. They needed to ensure you weren't harboring any unfortunate associations. Gambling debts. Criminal connections. Journalists in the family tree." "I'm a graduate student," Mia said, her voice steadier than she felt. I study child psychology. I've never even gotten a parking ticket. We know. The attorney's gaze held hers. That's why you're here. He gestured to the folder. Mia opened it with trembling fingers. The first page listed a salary that made her vision blur. She read it 3 times, convinced she was hallucinating. $15,000 per month for a governess position. The number glowed on the page like a promise, or a trap. There must be a mistake, she whispered. There is no mistake, Miss Donati. The child, Nico Rossi, requires specialized care. He is 7 years old. He has not spoken in 8 months. His previous governesses were inadequate. Some lasted weeks, some merely days. The family believes your background in trauma-informed care makes you uniquely suited to help him heal. What happened to him? Mia asked. What caused the mutism? The attorney's expression flickered, the first crack in his professional mask. A family tragedy. The details will be provided on a need-to-know basis once you've signed the contract. Mia turned the page. The contract itself was dense, immaculate, and terrifying in its specificity. The employee agrees to reside on the Rossi estate for the duration of the contract period, 1 calendar year. Departure from the grounds requires written authorization from the head of household. The employee agrees to maintain absolute confidentiality regarding all family matters, household operations, and personal observations. Violation of this clause will result in immediate legal action and forfeiture of all compensation. She kept reading, her pulse climbing with each paragraph. The employee will not engage in personal relationships with staff members. The employee will not discuss the terms of this contract with outside parties. The employee will submit to background verification and ongoing security protocols as deemed necessary by the head of household. The employee acknowledges that the nature of the position may require flexibility in duties and hours and agrees to accommodate reasonable requests from the head of household without prior notice. Reasonable requests, Mia repeated slowly. That's rather vague. Wealthy families require adaptability. The attorney's voice was silk over steel. Mr. Rossi may need you to accompany Nico to events, to adjust your schedule for family obligations, to be present when the child requires comfort outside normal working hours. Surely you understand. Trauma doesn't operate on a 9-to-5 schedule. It sounded reasonable. It sounded almost kind. But the words on the page felt like chains disguised as opportunity. This reads like I'm signing away my freedom, Mia said. It reads like privacy, Miss Donati. The Rossi family has enemies. People who would exploit any vulnerability, any loose thread. These terms exist to protect everyone involved. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Including you. Including you. The words landed like velvet-wrapped threats. Mia thought of her mother's medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter back home. The letters from collection agencies arrived like clockwork. Her father's shame as he'd admitted the truth over Christmas dinner. The second mortgage, the credit cards, the debts that had metastasized while Mia had been buried in graduate school, oblivious and idealistic and completely useless. $180,000. That's what a year at this salary would mean. Enough to pay off everything. Enough to save her parents from losing the house they'd owned for 30 years. Enough to finally stop feeling like a burden. The head of household, she said carefully. That would be Mr. Rossi. Nico's father. His brother. Alessandro Rossi. He assumed guardianship after the tragedy. A brother raising a brother. There was something almost noble about that. And Mr. Rossi, Alessandro, he approved my application personally? He selected you personally. The attorney produced a fountain pen, heavy, black, expensive, from over 200 candidates. He was very specific about what he wanted. Mia's fingers closed around the pen. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away. The contract was too detailed. The salary was too generous. The secrecy requirements were too absolute. No legitimate job came wrapped in this many chains. But instincts didn't pay debts. Instincts didn't save her parents' home. Instincts didn't erase the shame in her father's eyes when he'd begged her not to drop out of her program. 1 year. Just 1 year. Then you'll be free. She signed her name in ink that gleamed wet and dark as blood. The attorney collected the folder with something that looked almost like pity. Congratulations, Miss Donati. A car will collect you in 72 hours. Pack light. Everything you need will be provided. Everything. The Rossi family is generous to those who serve them well. He rose, extending his hand at last. His grip was cold. Welcome to the family. The words followed Mia out of the building, clinging to her skin like smoke. She didn't look back. The car that collected Mia was black, gleaming, and utterly silent. She'd expected a taxi. Maybe a town car with a chatty driver who'd share gossip about the Rossi family during the 3-hour journey from the city. Instead, a uniformed chauffeur had appeared at her apartment building precisely at noon, loaded her single suitcase into a trunk the size of her bathroom, and held the door open without a word. The interior smelled like leather and something else. Something sharp and expensive that Mia couldn't name. She watched the city dissolve into suburbs, then farmland, then hills that rose and fell like sleeping giants. The driver never spoke, never turned on the radio, never glanced at her in the rearview mirror. By the time the iron gates appeared, Mia had convinced herself she was being delivered to a fairy tale. Or a nightmare. The gates groaned open without the driver pressing any visible button. Sensors, she realized, hidden somewhere in the car's frame, and the private drive wound through grounds that stole her breath. Manicured gardens stretched in every direction, broken by marble fountains and sculptures that belonged in museums. Cypress trees lined the path like sentinels, their shadows slanting across the gravel as if reaching for the car. And then the house emerged. Not a house. An estate. A sprawling Renaissance villa with terracotta roofs and climbing roses, balconies draped in ivy, and windows that caught the afternoon sun like dozens of watching eyes. It was beautiful in the way that tombs were beautiful, designed to impress, to intimidate, and to remind visitors exactly how small they were. The driver stopped at the front steps and disappeared with her suitcase before Mia could thank him. The front doors opened. A woman in a pressed gray uniform appeared. The housekeeper, Mia guessed, her face arranged in professional neutrality. She was perhaps 50, with steel gray hair pinned in a severe bun and eyes that assessed Mia with the efficiency of a scanner. Miss Donati. I'm Signora Gallo. I manage the household. Her voice was clipped. Precise. I'll show you to your quarters. Mr. Rossi will receive you before dinner. Receive you. As if Mia were a package. A tribute. She followed Signora Gallo through a foyer that echoed with their footsteps, past oil paintings of stern ancestors and vases filled with flowers that seemed too perfect to be real. The air smelled of lemon polish and something older. History, maybe. Secrets pressed into the walls like fingerprints. The East Wing is Mr. Rossi's private domain, Signora Gallo said without looking back. Staff are not permitted without explicit invitation. The West Wing contains the family quarters, including Nico's rooms and your own. The South Wing houses the kitchen, dining rooms, and servants' areas. The North Wing is currently unused. Mia's head spun with geography. And the grounds. Extensive. You may walk the gardens during daylight hours. The perimeter is monitored by security. For your safety. Everything was for her safety. The contract. The rules. The walls are closing in like silk-lined jaws. Her room was on the second floor, tucked at the end of a long corridor. Signora Gallo opened the door and stepped aside. Mia's breath caught. The space was larger than her entire apartment in the city. A canopy bed draped in cream silk dominated one wall, piled with pillows that looked too pristine to touch. A private bathroom gleamed through an archway. Marble counters, a clawfoot tub, and toiletries arranged with military precision. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking the gardens, where the setting sun painted everything in gold. But it was the bookshelf that stopped her heart. Floor to ceiling, filled with titles she recognized, loved, mourned. The Secret Garden, Jane Eyre, Little Women, first editions in leather bindings, dog-eared copies of novels she'd mentioned in passing during her interview, comfort reads from childhood, academic texts from her thesis bibliography, and poetry collections she'd referenced in a single offhand comment. Someone had been listening, truly listening. "Mr. Rossi had these prepared for you," Signora Gallo said, watching Mia's face with unsettling attention. "He wanted you to feel at home." Mia ran her fingers along the spines, something warm and dangerous blooming in her chest. He remembered. This cold, mysterious man she hadn't even met. He paid attention to details no one else noticed. He cared enough to create this sanctuary. It's... Her voice cracked. "It's too much. Mr. Rossi does not believe in too much." Signora Gallo moved toward the door. "Dinner is at 7. Don't be late. He does not appreciate tardiness." The door clicked shut. Mia stood alone in her beautiful prison, surrounded by books that felt like promises, or traps she was too naive to recognize. She met Alessandro Rossi 3 hours later. The dining room was smaller than she'd expected. Intimate, almost. A table set for two beneath a chandelier that scattered light like scattered diamonds. Candles flickered in silver holders. Wine breathed in a crystal decanter. And at the head of the table sat a man who redefined the word dangerous. Alessandro Rossi was perhaps 35, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a Renaissance sculpture. Sharp cheekbones. A jaw that could cut glass. Eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the candlelight rather than reflect it. He wore a black suit tailored to emphasize the breadth of his shoulders, the narrowness of his waist, and the coiled power in every line of his body. When he saw Mia, he rose. "Miss Donati." His voice was low and smooth, with an accent she couldn't quite place. "Thank you for joining me. Thank you for the books." She hated how breathless she sounded. That was incredibly thoughtful. Thoughtful. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I simply believe that people deserve comfort in unfamiliar places. You've left everything you know to help my brother. The least I can do is ensure you don't feel like a stranger." He pulled out her chair himself. His fingers brushed her shoulder as she sat. Accidental, surely, and electricity sparked down her spine. "Tell me about your work," he said, pouring wine she hadn't agreed to drink. "Your thesis on childhood mutism. What drew you to that particular field?" No one had ever asked her that. Not really. Her professors wanted citations. Her classmates wanted study tips. Her parents wanted to know when she'd finish and get a real job. But Alessandro Rossi sat across from her, attention absolute, and listened as she explained about the silent children she'd studied. The ones who'd swallowed their trauma until their voices simply stopped working. The ones who needed patience, creativity, and unconditional presence. "And you believe you can help Nico," he said when she finished. It wasn't a question. "I believe I can try." Mia met his eyes. "But I need to understand what happened to him. The trauma that caused his silence. I can't help him heal if I don't know the wound." Something flickered in those dark depths. pain quickly smothered. Our parents were killed 8 months ago. A car accident on a mountain road. Nico was in the back seat. He watched them die. Alessandro's voice was steady, but his hands had tightened around his wine glass. He hasn't spoken since. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. His gaze held hers. Be effective. It should have sounded cold, demanding. But Mia heard what lived beneath the words. Desperation. Hope. A man who had tried everything to save his brother and was running out of options. I'll do everything I can, she promised. Alessandro studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, and the tension in his shoulders eased, just barely. I believe you will, Miss Donati. He raised his glass. To new beginnings. Mia clinked her glass against his, trying to ignore the way his eyes traced her face like she was already his. Nico Rossi was a ghost in designer clothing. Mia found him in the nursery on her first morning. A sun-drenched room filled with expensive toys that hadn't been touched in months. He sat by the window, knees drawn to his chest, staring at the gardens below with eyes that had seen too much. Dark curls. Pale skin. 7 years old and already ancient. Hello, Nico. Mia kept her voice soft, unthreatening. I'm Mia. I'm going to be spending time with you. He didn't look at her. Didn't acknowledge her existence at all. She hadn't expected him to. For the first week, Mia simply existed in his space. She sat in the corner and read aloud. Fairy tales, adventure stories, anything with enough action to fill the silence. She sketched in her notebook, making deliberately terrible drawings that she narrated with exaggerated frustration. She hummed songs her mother used to sing, melodies that drifted through the room like gentle ghosts. Nico ignored her completely. But on the 5th day, she noticed his eyes tracking her movements. Not obviously, he was too careful for that, but in the slight turn of his head, the almost imperceptible shift in his posture when she laughed at herself. He was watching. On the 8th day, Mia brought clay. She set it on the table without explanation, sat down across from Nico's empty chair, and began shaping it herself. Her fingers produced a lopsided dog that looked more like a melted potato. Then a tree tilted drunkenly to one side. Then, a bird that resembled a particularly aggressive cloud. This is terrible, she announced to no one. I'm a highly educated professional, and I cannot make a bird. This is humiliating. From the corner of her eye she saw Nico's lips twitch. Not a smile, but something close. On the 9th day, he sat across from her at the table. On the 10th day, he reached for the clay. His fingers moved with surprising confidence, shaping something small and delicate while Mia carefully pretended not to notice. When he finished, he set his creation on the table and returned to the window. A bird. Perfect. Wings stretched as if ready to fly. Mia's heart cracked. He wants to escape, she realized. He wants to fly away from all of this. From the house. From the memories. From the silence that swallowed him whole. That's beautiful, she whispered. Nico didn't respond. But his shoulders relaxed, just slightly. The breakthrough came on day 14. Mia had brought picture cards. Simple images of emotions that children could point to when words felt impossible. She spread them across the table. Happy, sad, angry, scared, confused, safe. You don't have to talk, she said quietly. You can just show me. Nico stared at the cards for a long time. Then his small hand reached out and touched one. Scared. Mia's throat tightened. That makes sense. You've been through something really frightening. It's okay to feel scared. His hand moved to another card. Sad. Of course you're sad. You lost people you loved very much. That sadness might never go away completely. but it will get softer, lighter, easier to carry. A pause. Then his fingers brushed a third card, so lightly she almost missed it. Safe. Mia looked up. Nico was watching her, really watching her, for the first time. His dark eyes held a question she recognized from every silent child she'd ever worked with. Can I trust you? She didn't reach for him. Didn't push. She simply placed her own hand over the card marked safe and nodded. I'm going to keep you safe, she promised. I'm not going anywhere. Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile, but something that might become one given enough time. He returned to his clay, making another bird. Then another. A whole flock of them, lined up along the windowsill like prayers. Mia watched him work, warmth spreading through her chest. I can do this. I can help him heal. She had no idea she was being watched either. 3 floors above, in a room filled with monitors and shadows, Alessandro Rossi observed the scene unfold in crystal-clear definition. The security system was state-of-the-art, high-resolution cameras in every room, every corridor, and every corner of the estate. Alessandro had justified their presence as necessary protection. The family had enemies. The household needed monitoring. It was simply prudent. But he wasn't watching for enemies tonight. He was watching her. The camera captured Mia's profile as she laughed at Nico's latest creation, a clay horse that looked suspiciously like it was dancing. Her dark hair spilled over her shoulders, catching the afternoon light. Her smile transformed her entire face, softening the angles and revealing something radiant beneath the professional composure. She was patient in a way no one else had been. The previous governesses had pushed too hard, expected too much, and given up too easily. But Mia simply existed in Nico's space, asking nothing, offering everything, and waiting for the child to come to her. And it was working. Alessandro watched his brother place a clay bird in Mia's palm, a gift, an offering, a bridge across the silence. Watched Mia's eyes fill with tears. She quickly blinked them away. Watched the moment between them, fragile and precious. She's good, he thought. Better than the others. But it wasn't just her skill that held his attention. It was the way she moved through the world, unguarded, sincere, incandescently naive. She believed people were fundamentally good. He could see it in every gesture, every soft word, every moment she stayed when anyone else would have fled. She believed the books had been kind. She believed the beautiful room was generosity. She believed he was a businessman with a tragic past and a wounded brother. She had no idea what she'd walked into. No idea that the Rossi fortune was built on blood and silence. No idea that the car accident was an execution disguised as tragedy. No idea that Alessandro had chosen her months ago, studied her, researched her, and ensured she would be desperate enough to sign his ironclad contract. She was exactly what he needed. Brilliant, isolated, hungry for approval, and utterly incapable of seeing the monster behind the gentleman's mask. Alessandro leaned back in his chair, watching Mia guide Nico through another drawing exercise. Her cardigan had slipped from one shoulder, revealing the delicate line of her collarbone. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense, not like the polished socialites who threw themselves at him at galas, but there was something magnetic about her, something that made him want to possess, to own, to keep. He'd never felt this way about the others. The previous governesses had been tools, nothing more, means to an end. But Mia Donati made him want things he shouldn't want, made him imagine futures that had no place in his world. She's mine now, he thought, the certainty settling into his bones. She just doesn't know it yet. On the screen, Mia reached out and smoothed a curl from Nico's forehead. The gesture was tender, maternal, innocent. Alessandro smiled. The gilded cage was closing around her, one kind gesture at a time. And she had no idea. The nightmares came for Mia 3 weeks into her tenure. They weren't her own, they were echoes of the stories she'd researched. Silent children. Traumatized families. The weight of suffering she couldn't fully heal. She'd wake gasping, her heart racing, the darkness of her beautiful room pressing in like a living thing. Tonight was worse than usual. She'd dreamed of Nico standing in a burning car, screaming without sound while the flames consumed everything around him. The image clung to her eyelids even after she forced them open, leaving her shaken and sick with borrowed grief. Sleep was impossible. She slipped from her bed, pulling a cardigan over her thin nightgown, and decided warm milk was worth the risk of navigating the unfamiliar hallways. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Warm milk fixes everything, tesoro. The corridor stretched before her, lit only by moonlight filtering through high windows. The estate was different at night. Colder, more imposing, the shadows deeper and more menacing. Every creak of the old floors made her freeze, certain she'd wake someone who'd question why she was wandering. She had nearly reached the stairs when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong in this elegant mausoleum. A scream. Male. Choked off abruptly into wet, desperate silence. Mia's blood turned to ice. Don't investigate, her rational mind warned. Go back to your room. Pretend you heard nothing. But her feet moved before her brain could stop them, carrying her toward the east wing, the section Signora Gallo had explicitly forbidden. Mr. Rossi's private domain. Staff are not permitted without an explicit invitation. The corridor here was different. No moonlight penetrated the heavy curtains. No decorative sconces softened the darkness. Mia moved by touch, her fingers trailing along wallpaper that felt old and thick, until she saw light bleeding from beneath a door at the end of the hall. The door was ajar. She pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, and peered through the gap. The room beyond was a study. Leather chairs, towering bookshelves, and a massive desk that gleamed with polish. It should have looked elegant, civilized, a gentleman's retreat. But the scene unfolding inside belonged in a nightmare. A man knelt on the hardwood floor, his face bloodied beyond recognition, his hands bound behind his back with what looked like wire. 2 guards flanked him, massive, expressionless, wearing suits that didn't quite hide the weapons at their hips. And Alessandro Rossi stood over his victim like a god of vengeance. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. His knuckles glistened red. His face held an expression Mia had never seen. Cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of the warmth he'd shown her at dinner. I gave you one chance, Marco. His voice was ice and gravel, terrifyingly calm despite the violence dripping from his hands. One chance to prove your loyalty, and you chose to sell information to the Moretti family. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Marco sobbed through broken teeth. Please, Signor Rossi, I have a family. You should have thought of that before you betrayed mine. Alessandro crouched, gripping the man's jaw with bloody fingers. The tenderness was gone. The gentleman was gone. What remained was something ancient and merciless, a predator playing with prey that had already been caught. The Morettis killed my parents, he said softly. They tried to kill my brother. And you were feeding them information about my household, about my security, about her. Mia's breath stopped. Her. I didn't tell them much, Marco whimpered. Just schedules. Routines. Nothing. You told them about the governess. Alessandro's voice dropped to something almost gentle. The new one. The pretty one who reads stories to my brother. They asked. They wanted to know. I know exactly what they wanted. Alessandro released Marco's jaw and straightened, wiping his bloody hands on a handkerchief with casual precision. What happens to traitors, Marco? Marco screamed. The sound cut off when Alessandro nodded to the guards. They dragged the broken man toward a door Mia hadn't noticed. Heavy, reinforced, and leading down into darkness. A basement. A cellar. A place where screams disappeared, and bodies followed. Mia stumbled backward, her cardigan catching on a wall sconce with a soft metallic clink. She froze. In the study, Alessandro's head turned toward the sound. For one terrible moment she was certain he could see her, that those dark eyes could pierce walls, pierce shadows, and pierce the pathetic hiding place she'd chosen. Her lungs refused to expand. Her legs refused to move. But then he turned back to his desk, pouring whiskey with steady hands, as if he hadn't just ordered a man's execution. Mia fled. She made it to her room through some miracle of muscle memory, locked the door with shaking fingers, and collapsed against the wood. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her entire body trembled with adrenaline and horror. He's a monster, her mind screamed. He beat that man bloody. He sent him to die. But another voice, smaller, more desperate, whispered something else. Marco was a traitor. He sold information that could have gotten Nico killed. Alessandro was protecting his family. Protecting his brother. Protecting you. Mia pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to erase the images seared into her brain. The Morettas killed his parents. They're still threatening the family. Alessandro has enemies who want him dead, who want Nico dead. He has to be strong. He has to be ruthless. It's the only way to survive. She thought of the books on her shelf, the dinner conversation, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered, as if her work mattered. He's not a monster. He's just doing what's necessary. The world is cruel, and he has to be crueler to protect the people he loves. Right. The question haunted her until dawn broke over the estate. She didn't sleep. The invitation arrived 3 days later, slipped beneath her door like a secret. Thick ivory cardstock. Elegant black script. A message that was clearly not a request. Your presence is required at this evening's reception. A car will collect you at 6. Mia stared at the note, her stomach churning. She'd been avoiding Alessandro since that night. She takes meals in her room, timing her walks to miss his appearances in the house, throwing herself into Nico's care with desperate focus, as if enough attention to the child could erase what she'd witnessed in the study. But avoidance, it seemed, was not an option. She was searching her meager wardrobe, 2 professional dresses, neither suitable for a reception, when Signora Gallo appeared in her doorway. From Mr. Rossi. The garment bag was heavy in Mia's hands. She unzipped it with trembling fingers. Inside was a gown that stole her breath. Midnight blue silk that pooled like liquid starlight. A neckline that dipped daringly low, framing everything it revealed. A slit that climbed to mid-thigh. The fabric felt like water against her skin. Impossibly soft, impossibly expensive. Nestled in tissue paper beside the dress were sapphire earrings that caught the light like captured fragments of sky. A matching pendant. Shoes with heels so delicate they looked like they'd shatter under normal weight. I can't accept this, Mia whispered. It's not a request. Signora Gallo's face remained neutral. Mr. Rossi selected these pieces specifically for you. He wishes you to feel comfortable among his associates. Comfortable. In a dress that cost more than her annual salary. Among people who probably spent more on champagne than she earned in a year. What kind of reception is this? Mr. Rossi entertains business associates several times a year. Tonight's gathering is smaller than most. Perhaps 40 guests. You'll be seated at his table. A pause. He speaks highly of your work with Nico. He wishes to introduce you to people who matter. People who matter. Mia thought of bloody knuckles. screaming men, doors that led to darkness. What kind of people matter to a man like Alessandro Rossi? The ballroom was a cathedral of crystal and candlelight. 3 chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with frescoes, cherubs and clouds and gods who seemed to watch the festivities below with knowing smiles. Tables draped in white linen held centerpieces of black roses, beautiful, unsettling, impossible. A string quartet played something classical and vaguely mournful in the corner. And the guests! The guests looked like they'd stepped from the pages of a fashion magazine, then been dipped in something darker. Men in bespoke suits with eyes like sharks. Women dripping diamonds, their smiles too sharp to be sincere. Everyone speaks in low, careful tones, assessing each new arrival with the precision of predators evaluating prey. Mia felt like a lamb who'd wandered into a den of wolves. The dress fit perfectly, too perfectly, as if someone had taken her measurements while she slept. The earrings weighed heavily on her lobes. The heels made her legs look endless but forced her to move with calculated care. She was reaching for a glass of champagne when he appeared at her side. "You look exquisite." Alessandro's voice was low and intimate, meant only for her ears. He wore black, tailored perfectly to emphasize the breadth of his shoulders, the narrow line of his waist, and the coiled power in every movement. His dark eyes swept over her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I'm a governess," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I shouldn't be here. You're here because I want you here." His hand settled on the small of her back. Warm, possessive, impossible to ignore. "Because you've accomplished in 3 weeks what 5 previous governesses couldn't accomplish in years. Because Nico speaks to you with his hands and his eyes, even if his voice isn't ready yet. He's a remarkable child." "He is." Alessandro's thumb traced a small circle against her spine. "But he wouldn't be healing without you. That deserves recognition." He guided her through the crowd, his hand never leaving her back. Mia felt eyes tracking their progress, calculating gazes that noted the dress, the jewelry, and the proprietary way he touched her. "He's marking me," she realized with dawning horror. "He's showing them I belong to him." A silver-haired man intercepted them near the champagne fountain. "Alessandro, you've been keeping secrets." "Vittorio." Alessandro's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Allow me to introduce Mia Donati. She's caring for Nico." "Caring for Nico." Vittorio's gaze crawled over Mia's body like something with legs. "How fortunate for the boy. And for you, I imagine. Miss Donati is an exceptional child psychologist. Her expertise has been invaluable." "I'm sure her expertise is only one of her valuable qualities." Mia's skin crawled. She opened her mouth to respond, but Alessandro moved faster. He stepped between her and Vittorio, his body language shifting from relaxed to something coiled and dangerous. "Choose your next words very carefully, old friend." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Vittorio's smile faltered. "I meant no offense." "Then give none." Alessandro's voice was silk over steel. "Miss Donati is under my protection. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. I trust one don't need to explain what that means." A long pause. "Of course not." Vittorio inclined his head. "My apologies, Miss Donati. I was merely admiring Alessandro's taste." He disappeared into the crowd. Alessandro turned to Mia, his expression softening. "I apologize for that. Vittorio forgets himself after too much wine." "Under your protection?" Mia echoed. "You live in my home, work for my family, care for my brother." His hand returned to her back. "Of course you're under my protection. Did you think I would let anyone speak to you that way?" There was something almost tender in his voice. almost human. Mia thought of bloody knuckles. Screaming men. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something far more dangerous. She felt safe. The attack came 3 weeks later at dawn. Mia was jolted from sleep by the sound she'd only heard in nightmares. Shattering glass, sharp cracks of gunfire, and men shouting in Italian too rapid for her to understand. She stumbled from bed, heart in her throat, and found the hallway filled with smoke and running guards. "Stay in your room," one of them barked, shoving her back through her doorway. But Nico was alone in the nursery. Mia pushed past the guard, ignoring his shouts, and ran toward the west wing. The smoke was thicker here, stinging her eyes, filling her lungs. She heard more gunfire, closer now, and the sound of men dying. The nursery door was open. Inside, chaos. The window had been shattered. Glass littered the floor like scattered diamonds. Cold air poured through the gap, carrying the smell of gunpowder and blood. And huddled beneath his bed, clutching his clay birds to his chest, was Nico. "I'm here," Mia gasped, dropping to her knees and crawling under with him. She pulled his small body against hers, wrapping herself around him like a shield. "I've got you. I've got you. Don't let go." He was trembling so violently she could feel it in her bones. His breath came in silent, terrified gasps, the body's response to trauma when the voice had already failed. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, even though she had no idea if it was true. "Just hold on to me. Hold on to your birds. I won't let anything happen to you." The gunfire lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of explosions and screaming, and a world that had suddenly turned to war. Mia counted each second, her body curved around Nico's, ready to take any bullet that came through the floor. Then, silence. Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Deliberate. Mia's arms tightened around Nico. The nursery door swung open. Alessandro Rossi stood in the threshold like an avenging angel. His white dress shirt was splattered with blood, none of it his, she somehow knew, and his eyes were wild with something that looked like barely contained terror. Then he saw her. Saw the way she'd wrapped herself around Nico, ready to die for a child who wasn't even hers. Something shifted in his expression. Something raw. Hungry. Reverent. "You stayed," he said quietly. "Of course I stayed." Mia's voice shook. "He needed me." Alessandro crossed the room in 3 strides and crouched before them. His hands, still bloody, trembled as he reached out. Not toward Nico. Toward her. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch unbearably gentle. "Everyone runs," he murmured. "When the bullets start flying, everyone runs. But you stayed. You protected him. You could have died." His voice cracked, just barely. "You knew that. And you stayed anyway." Mia's heart hammered against her ribs. She was still on the floor, still wrapped around Nico, still covered in dust and probably blood. But Alessandro looked at her like she was something precious. Something sacred. Something he would kill to keep. By noon, the estate was on total lockdown. Guards at every door, every window, and every corner of the grounds. The damaged wing was sealed off. Security protocols that Mia hadn't known existed snapped into place with military precision. And a new rule was delivered personally by Alessandro, who appeared at her door looking like he hadn't slept in days. "No one leaves the grounds. Not staff. Not you. Not anyone." Mia had expected this. She'd prepared her response. "I understand the danger is real. But I have a life outside these walls. Your life outside these walls is why the Moretti family targeted you." His voice was flat. Exhausted. Utterly immovable. They've been watching the estate for months, gathering intelligence on everyone who works here. When they learned about you, about how much Nico has improved under your care, they decided you were leverage. Leverage. They thought taking you would break him. Break me. Alessandro's hands flexed at his sides. They were right. Mia's breath caught. What? You're not just a governess anymore, Mia. You're not just someone who works in this house. He stepped closer, his presence filling the doorway. You're the first person who's made Nico smile in 8 months. The first person he's trusted. The first person I've. He stopped. Started again. You're under my protection. And I protect what's mine. What's mine? The words should have terrified her. Should have sent her running, contracts and debts be damned. But Alessandro's eyes held something desperate. Something almost human. The look of a man who'd lost everything once and couldn't bear to lose anything else. How long? Mia asked quietly. How long do I have to stay locked in here? Until the Moretti threat is neutralized. And if that takes months. Years. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The news about her mother came 37 days into the lockdown. Mia had been allowed exactly 1 phone call per week, monitored of course by Alessandro's security team, and her father's voice had never sounded older. She fell, tesoro. Just a small fall, but her hip. The doctors say she needs surgery. I'm trying to handle the insurance, but you know how these things go. His voice had trembled. Her mother had cried in the background. And Mia had stood in Alessandro's study, surrounded by mahogany and old money, feeling utterly powerless to help the people who needed her most. She'd begged Alessandro for permission to visit. He'd refused. She'd begged again, offering to take guards and to follow any protocols he set. He'd refused again. The roads aren't secure. The Morettis are regrouping. I can't guarantee your safety outside these walls. Then send me with a convoy. An army. Whatever you need. What I need is for you to stay here. My mother is scared. And you being dead won't help her fear. The conversation had ended there. But the desperation hadn't. At 2 a.m. on day 41, Mia made her choice. She dressed in dark clothes, tucked her hair under a cap, and crept through the servants' corridor she'd mapped during her weeks of captivity. Past the kitchens. Through the laundry. Toward a side gate she'd noticed was less guarded than the others. The night was cold, the moon hidden behind clouds. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain the guards could hear it. Just get to the gate. Get to the road. There's a bus station 3 miles away. You can be in the city by morning. She reached the gate. Her fingers closed around the iron bars. Going somewhere. The voice came from the shadows. Low. Dangerously calm. Mia spun. Alessandro emerged from the darkness like something from a nightmare. He was still dressed in his day clothes. Had he slept at all in the past week? And his expression was carved from stone. My mother is sick, Mia said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. I have to see her. What you have to do is follow the rules I've set for your protection. I'm not a prisoner. No. He stepped closer. Closer. Until her back pressed against the cold iron gate and his body blocked any escape. You signed a contract, Mia. You agreed to stay on these grounds. You agreed to follow the protocols I set. You agreed to listen. That was before I understood what this family really is. The words hung between them, an accusation, a challenge. Alessandro's eyes flickered. And what do you think this family is? I've seen the blood on your hands. Her voice cracked. I've heard the screams in the night. I know there's a basement in this house where people go and don't come back. I know the security protocols aren't about protecting anyone. They're about keeping your secrets. Those secrets protect you. They trap me. They keep you alive. His voice echoed in the empty night, raw with something she'd never heard before. Fear. Desperation. Something that sounded almost like love. Mia froze. Alessandro's hands rose to cup her face, not roughly, but with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. His thumbs traced her cheekbones while his eyes searched hers. "You think I want this?" he murmured. "You think I wanted to inherit an empire built on blood? To be the kind of man who beats information out of traitors? To watch you look at me with fear instead of—" He stopped. Instead of what? His forehead touched hers. His breath was warm against her lips. "If you provoke me like that again," he breathed, "if you look at me with those innocent eyes while defying my direct orders, I will forget how to be kind. Maybe I don't want your kindness." The words escaped before she could stop them, and she realized with horrifying clarity that she meant them. Alessandro's eyes darkened. "Careful, Mia." His voice was a warning and an invitation. "Careful what you ask for." His mouth hovered over hers, not kissing, not quite, just waiting, giving her the chance to pull away, to remember who he was, what he'd done. She didn't move. "I've been careful my whole life," she whispered, "and it's gotten me nowhere." Alessandro made a sound low in his throat, half growl, half surrender, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was everything she shouldn't have wanted. Demanding, possessive, claiming her with the same intensity he brought to everything else. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and Mia found herself kissing him back with a desperation that matched his own. "This is wrong," some distant part of her brain screamed. "He's dangerous. He's a monster. He's the only person who's ever looked at me like I matter." When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "I can't let you leave," he said quietly. "Not because I want to trap you. Because if you step outside these walls, the Moretti family will take you. They will hurt you. They will use you against me. And I will burn this entire city to the ground to get you back." Mia stared at him. "He means it. Every word." "What happens now?" she whispered. Alessandro's thumb brushed her swollen lips. "Now," he said, "we go inside. And you decide what you want." He took her hand. She followed. The truth found her by accident. 3 days after the kiss at the gate, 3 days of charged glances and careful distance and Mia questioning every choice she'd ever made, she went searching for a spare key. Nico had locked himself in the music room during a tantrum, and she needed something to pick the lock. The third drawer of Alessandro's study should have contained household tools. Instead, it contained a leather-bound ledger. Mia's hands trembled as she opened it. Names. Dates. Numbers that made no sense until she realized they represented payments. Bribes, debts, and protection money. Import routes for shipments that didn't appear in any official manifest. Export records for cargo with no description. Financial transactions are laundered through shell companies across 3 continents. She kept turning pages, her horror growing with each revelation. The Rossi family wasn't old money. They weren't even new money. They were a mafia empire. And Alessandro wasn't just the head of household. He was a don. Behind a false panel in the wall, discovered when Mia leaned against it while processing her shock, was a weapons cache that would arm a small militia. Handguns, assault rifles, grenades, and at the center, laid out on velvet like sacred artifacts, was a pair of brass knuckles worn smooth with use. His knuckles, Mia realized. The blood on his hands isn't just metaphorical. "I wondered when you'd find that." She whirled. Alessandro stood in the doorway of his own study, his expression unreadable. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look angry. He simply walked toward her with the measured steps of a man who had anticipated this moment for weeks. "You," her voice cracked. "Everything. All of it. The contract, the lockdown, this is a crime syndicate." Yes. No apology. No excuse. Just that single, devastating syllable. He took the ledger from her frozen fingers and set it aside with careful precision. Then he turned to face her fully. "My father built this empire," he said quietly. "And his father before him and his father before that. 4-5 generations, the Rossi family has controlled the shipping routes in and out of this region. Drugs, weapons, people, whatever paid the most. People. Trafficking." His jaw tightened. "A practice I ended the day I took control. There are lines even I won't cross. But drugs still flow. Along with weapons. Along with everything else that keeps this empire standing." He met her eyes. "I inherited a throne built on blood, Mia. I didn't choose it. I didn't want it. But when my parents were murdered, when I found Nico screaming in the wreckage of their car, I understood that I had two options. Take control, or watch everything my family built fall to the Morettis." The room tilted. "The accident," Mia breathed. "You said it was." "I said it was a tragedy. I didn't say it was an accident." Alessandro's voice was flat. "The Moretti family rigged the car. They wanted to wipe out the entire Rossi line in one stroke. My parents. Nico. Me, I was supposed to be in that car, but I was delayed at a meeting. Oh God. They almost succeeded." His hands flexed at his sides. "Nico watched our parents burn. He hasn't spoken a word since. And every day I don't destroy the Moretti family is a day I fail to avenge what they took from us." Mia pressed her back against the wall, needing the support. "Why are you telling me this? Why show me any of this?" "Because you asked." He stepped closer. "Because you deserve to know what you've walked into. Because I'm done pretending to be something I'm not." "You're a criminal." "Yes. You've killed people. Many. You've done things that should send me to prison for the rest of my life. Yes." His voice was soft. "I'm not a good man, Mia. I've never claimed to be. I've lied, destroyed, and murdered without remorse. I've done things that would make you run screaming into the night if I described them in detail." He was so close now that she could feel the heat of his body, could smell his cologne and something darker underneath. Gunpowder, maybe. Blood. "But you," he murmured. "You're the only pure thing I have left." "I'm not pure. You stayed with Nico during the attack. You wrapped yourself around him and prepared to die for a child who wasn't even yours." His hand rose, tucking that familiar strand of hair behind her ear. "You looked at me, knowing what I am, what I've done, and you kissed me back. That was a mistake. Was it?" His forehead touched hers. His breath was warm against her lips. "I won't apologize for what I am," he said. "I can't change it. I can't undo the blood on my hands or the bodies in my wake. But I'm asking you to stay. Not because of the contract. Not because I'll stop you if you try to leave." "Then why?" "Because I need you." His voice broke, just barely. "Because Nico needs you. Because without you, this darkness will swallow what's left of my soul." Mia closed her eyes. She thought of everything she'd learned, everything she'd seen. The ledger and the weapons and the screaming men were dragged to basements. She thought of Nico, finally smiling again, handing her clay birds like offerings. She thought of Alessandro, broken and bloody and terrifyingly honest. This is insane. He's a monster. I should run. But she didn't run. Instead, she opened her eyes, met his gaze, and made a choice that would change everything. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me all of it. The empire. The enemies. Everything you've been hiding. If I'm going to stay, if I'm going to choose this, I need to understand exactly what I'm choosing." Something flickered in Alessandro's expression. Shock. Hope. Love. "You're sure?" "No." She almost laughed. "I'm not sure of anything anymore. But I'm done being the naive governess who pretends not to see the truth. If this is my life now, I want to face it with open eyes." Alessandro stared at her for a long moment. Then he took her hand and led her toward the basement door. "Let me show you who we really are." The betrayal came from within. Mia had spent 3 weeks learning the truth of the Rossi Empire, the operations, the alliances, and the enemies who circled like sharks. She'd attended meetings where men spoke in code about shipments and payments. She'd watched Alessandro navigate a world of violence with the same precision he brought to everything else. She'd become, without quite intending it, something more than a governess. She'd become a confidant, a partner, a witness. And in all that time, she'd never suspected the traitor was living under their roof. It was Nico who gave her the first clue. The boy had finally started speaking. Short phrases, whispered only to Mia, but words nonetheless. And one evening, as she tucked him into bed, he grabbed her hand with unusual urgency. "The Gray Lady," he whispered. "She talks on the phone at night. She talks about you and Alec. She says bad things." Mia's blood ran cold. "What kind of bad things, sweetheart?" "She says when the other family comes, they should take you first. Because Alec would do anything to get you back." The Gray Lady. Signora Gallo. Mia found the evidence in the housekeeper's private quarters that night. A burner phone hidden in a hollowed-out book. A schedule marked in red. Guard rotations, Alessandro's meetings, and Mia's daily routines with Nico. And a payment confirmation from 3 days ago. 50,000 euros deposited in a Swiss account. The Morettis weren't just regrouping. They were planning a final strike. And they had an informant who knew exactly when the Rossi estate would be vulnerable. Mia stood in the center of Signora Gallo's room, evidence clutched in her hands, and understood that she had a choice. She could take this information and run. The gate was unguarded on Tuesday nights. She'd learned that during her weeks of captivity, she could disappear into the city, find her family, and pay off their debts with the money she'd already earned. She could pretend the last 4 months had been a fever dream and start over as someone new. Or she could stay. She thought of Nico finally speaking again, his small voice calling her name. She thought of Alessandro, broken and bloody and terrifyingly honest, asking her to stay. She thought of the woman she'd been when she walked through those gates. Naive, desperate, certain that goodness was enough. Certain that kindness without power made a difference. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone harder. Someone who understood that love meant sacrifice, and protection meant getting your hands dirty. Mia took the evidence to Alessandro. The confrontation happened at midnight. Signora Gallo was brought to Alessandro's study by 2 guards, her face pale with terror. The evidence was spread across the mahogany desk, phone records, payment confirmations, and the schedule that detailed exactly how to breach the estate's defenses. 30 years, Alessandro said quietly, standing behind his desk. "You've worked for this family for 30 years. My father trusted you. My mother trusted you. And you sold us to the Morettis. They threatened my family," the housekeeper whispered. "They have my sister, my niece. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'll be rescued." Alessandro's voice was flat. "I've already sent men. Your family will be safe within the hour." Signora Gallo sagged with relief, then froze as she realized what that meant. "But you," Alessandro continued, "made a choice. You looked at Mia, at the woman who saved my brother, and you decided to hand her to the people who would use her against me." He leaned forward. "What happens to traitors, Signora?" The housekeeper started to scream. Mia stepped forward. "Wait." Every eye in the room turned to her. "She has information," Mia said quietly. "The Morettas plans. Their timeline. Their entry points. If she's been communicating with them for months, she knows things we need." She met Alessandro's eyes. "Kill her and we lose that intelligence. Let me question her first." A long silence. Then Alessandro nodded. Mia turned to the trembling housekeeper. "Tell me everything," she said. "And I mean everything." The Morettas fell 3 nights later. Using the information Mia extracted, Alessandro orchestrated a counterstrike that dismantled the enemy family in a single coordinated attack. Their compound was breached. Their leadership was eliminated. Their operations were absorbed into the Rossi Empire. Mia didn't ask for details. She didn't need them. She simply stood at Alessandro's side as the dust settled, her hand in his, her future bound to his empire. Dawn broke over the estate, painting the gardens in shades of gold and rose. They stood on the balcony outside Alessandro's study, a balcony Mia had never been allowed to access before. The air smelled of coffee and jasmine and something she could only describe as victory. "You could have run," Alessandro said quietly. "You had every reason to. You had the evidence. You had the schedule. You could have disappeared and no one would have blamed you." "I know. But you stayed." He turned to face her. "You stayed and you fought and he shook his head. "You're magnificent." "I'm terrifying." Mia almost laughed. "I interrogated a woman for 3 hours. I helped plan an attack that killed dozens of people. I'm not the person I was when I walked through those gates." "No." Alessandro's hand cupped her face. "You're someone better. Someone stronger. Someone who understands that kindness without power is just weakness in a pleasant dress." "That's very dark. The world is very dark." He pulled a ring from his pocket, a blood-red ruby surrounded by diamonds, heavy with history and violence and love. "But you walked into my darkness, and you didn't run. You looked at the monster and you stayed." Mia stared at the ring, at the man, at the empire stretching before her, terrible and beautiful and hers. "That's not an engagement ring," she said. "That's a crown." "It's both." His eyes held hers. "Rule with me, Mia. Not as my governess. Not as my prisoner. Not as my lover. As my queen." She thought of everything she'd learned, everything she'd done. The blood is on her own hands now. Not literally, but close enough. She thought of Nico, finally speaking in full sentences, finally playing with other children, finally healing. She thought of her parents, whose debts were paid and whose house was saved, and who believed their daughter was working for a wealthy family as a child psychologist. They'll never know the truth, she realized. They'll never know who I've become. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some truths were too heavy for the people you loved. Mia took the ring and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Alessandro had probably had her sized weeks ago. "If you provoke me like that again," she whispered, echoing his words from that first night, "I might just forget how to be kind too." Alessandro laughed, a real laugh, the first she'd ever heard, and pulled her into his arms. "Welcome home," he murmured against her hair. Outside, the sun rose over the Rossi estate, and Mia Donati, scholar, governess, queen. Finally understood what it meant to belong. The end. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.